I'm glad to be here this morning. I'm glad you're here. It's always good to be at North Sumner. I'm used to being up here for singing and then maybe to hear Mike Richardson preach. But you may know I'm no Mike Richardson. And I hadn't been much of a singer this morning either as far as that goes, but I think I can still preach. Preaching and singing are very different, you know. So I want to talk to you about James 2 this morning during this time. And I entitled this lesson, Living Faith Acts and Keeps Acting. And I proposed during the 9 o'clock with James 1 that overall the theme of James is what I do equals what I really believe, and what I really believe equals what I do. And this is not just a theme for James, it's really the entire Bible would teach us that this is true. We do what we believe, although sometimes we want to act like that's not true, but it is true. And we have a handout, and you have a handout, and hopefully that won't be a distraction having a handout. 2 points. Living faith shows no favoritism, chapter 2, verses 1 through 13. Favor the rich? Just say no. Favor the rich? No, for many good and great reasons. And then point number 2 from James 2, living faith shows faith-filled works, 14 through 26. Faith minus works equals non-profitable, non-useful, non-saving. That's 14 through 19. And then faith minus works equals dead. No wonder it's all those 9 things, right? Chapter 2, verses 20 through 26. So let's read James chapter 2, 1 through 13. My brothers, show no partiality as you hold the faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory. For if a man wearing a gold ring and fine clothing comes into your assembly, and a poor man in shabby clothing also comes in, and if you pay attention to the one who wears the fine clothing and say, you sat here in a good place, while you say to the poor man, you stand over there or sit down at my feet, have you not then made distinctions among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Listen, my beloved brothers, has not God chosen those who are poor in the world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom, which he has promised to those who love him? But you have dishonored the poor man. Are not the rich the ones who oppress you and the ones who drag you into court? Are they not the ones who blaspheme the honorable name by which you were called? If you really fulfill the royal law according to the scripture, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, you are doing well. But if you show partiality, you are committing sin and are convicted by the law as transgressors. For whoever keeps the whole law but fails in one point has become guilty of all of it. For he who said, do not commit adultery, also said, do not murder. If you do not commit adultery but do murder, you have become a transgressor of the law. So speak and so act as those who are to be judged under the law of liberty. For judgment is without mercy to one who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment. It's a fact. God does not play favorites. For there is no partiality with God. Romans chapter 2, verse 11. And the Bible actually teaches this overall, right? In more than one place, the Bible teaches that God does not play favorites, that God does not show partiality. So we accept that, although sometimes it looks like he does, right? This picture here, does God play favorites? Why would a caring God bless some and not others? Well, that's a crazy question to ask, right? God blesses everybody. But their point in the picture, I think, to be fair, is that he certainly does bless some much more than others. I mean, you can just go drive in Nashville, and there's people that have a lot more, and then there's people that have a lot less. There's people that have lots of family, and it seems like every one of them's healthy. There's other people that, you know, they have a lot of family, but all of them are sick. All of them have all kinds of trouble. People that don't have a family at all to speak of. People that have great jobs, people that have no jobs, people that have a big house, people that have no house, on and on and on. I look at this girl here. This is a picture I use when I teach economics about pointing out how we need to be satisfied. This girl is an old picture now. I'm not sure where it's from, maybe Africa or Indonesia, somewhere like that. Look at how happy she is with that dog. And that dog looks pretty happy too, although he seems like he's being held in a pretty uncomfortable way there. But remember, someone is happy with less than you have. So much of what we are happy with, or whether we're happy or joyful, is on us, right? What we do with it. But a girl like that's just blessed a lot less, materially speaking, than people that live in America as a rule. So he certainly blesses some people much more than others. Now, I will say God saves everybody the same by grace through faith. And I do believe salvation is available to everybody. You know, it's a mistake to think it's only a few that God has called. He's called people. And we get to choose what we do with that call. He saves everybody the same. Everybody has that opportunity for salvation. So in that area, and that's the most important area, by far, God saves everybody the same by grace through faith. But you know, not playing favorites does not mean treating everybody the exact same in every way, right? That doesn't, that's some people's definition, but that's not God, and it's not the Bible definition. You know, not everybody likes spinach, for example. Some are even allergic to spinach. And so what if I were gonna, I've got vegetables in my truck actually that I meant to bring in earlier, tomatoes, cucumbers, and cantaloupe from the garden yesterday. So we'll bring them in after services. So don't leave too quick. We want to make sure you get some if you want some. And hopefully the hot truck is not hurting them too bad right now. But you know, not playing favorites does mean having a good reason for treating different people different. You know, I don't go pick, we don't have spinach planted right now. But if I had a whole big group of spinach, and then I also had a big group of cantaloupe maybe at the same time, and some of you were dumb enough to prefer spinach over cantaloupe. I think that's the right way to put it, right? So I would give you spinach, even though that's not what I want to do. I mean, that seems like a terrible thing to do to somebody. I'd give the other person cantaloupe that likes cantaloupe better, right? I don't treat you the same in the sense of everything has to be exactly the same. You know, sometimes I like to kind of hit guys on the back. And you might kind of figure out that I kind of hit hard sometimes, to be fair. You know, I get a little carried away. I'm just so friendly, you know. And you know, what if I did that to some 100-pound woman? Treat her the same. You know, knock her on the floor, basically, probably. That's not what I did with the guy, but, you know, I'd hit you the same on the back. You know, that's not what we mean, right? We don't mean if we treat people different, we're playing favorites. But we have good reason to treat people different, right? You think about God. God has good reasons every single time. God has a good reason that you're part of a big family. He has a good reason that I'm part of a small family. I understand we have free will, but I'm saying the part that God plays in these things. He has a good reason. Now, we do not know exactly what they are all the time, maybe even most of the time. I don't know why you have a better job than somebody else does. I don't know why you have a really great singing voice and somebody else doesn't have a great singing voice. I don't know why. I don't know why God has treated you different. Seems like he's blessed you more in some area than somebody else. Maybe he really has blessed you more. But whatever the reason is, he has a good reason for it, right? And that's what we have to be, right? Like, we have to be that way. We must have a good reason every single time. Now, we may not know exactly what they are, right? Sometimes we don't know why we're treating somebody different, but if we're living within the Word and we're trying to follow what God says, we may not be able to formulate why we're treating somebody different, but we have a good reason. We do need to know what our reasons must not be, right? Hate is not a good reason for us to treat different people different. You know, I just don't like people I think somebody here is from Lafayette. I don't like people from Lafayette. I mean, that's kind of reasonable if you think about it, but that would not be a good reason to treat people different. I just dislike this group of people. I dislike these people. Selfishness is not a good reason for us to treat different people different. And that's what these verses cover in detail, right? That's what James 2, the first part of James 2 is all about, is really about selfishness. You know, why do we treat rich people better? James condemns acts of favoritism. Why treat a non-shabby person better than someone who looks shabby? I am very sensitive to shabby people being treated worse. I'll just have to say I have a personal interest in that, we'll say. I'm kind of known for how bad I dress, usually. So why do we do that? Well, there's lots of motives, but none of them are really good. You know, why do you treat this rich person that comes to the assembly better? Or why do you treat, that guy's a gospel preacher. Oh, we treat him better. Why do you treat him better? Why do you treat him better? What's the reason? Well, he'll talk good about our congregation to other people. It'll help our reputation, whatever. That's not a good reason. Any kind of selfish reason is not a good reason to treat different people different. It's got to be something better than that. And in particular, love and faith are the key positive ways to avoid having bad reasons for treating different people different, right? If I really love the person, if I really have faith, and maybe faith in particular is emphasized, since we are in the book of James, after all, faith and works. It is true that if I meet a homeless person today, and I meet a millionaire today, that more than likely the millionaire can do more things for me than the homeless person. That's not always true, but more than likely. But if I really love both of them, and if I really trust God, I don't really care about that, right? I understand that, God might use a millionaire to help me, but I don't need to be out seeking that and playing favorites toward them and not trusting God in the process. Instead, I'll treat people the way they ought to be treated. Will I treat the homeless person and the millionaire probably differently? Well, they probably have different needs. So I'll probably treat them differently. But I won't treat them differently because, I don't really trust God, so I got to work out where this millionaire might show favor to me and somehow help my career or help my whatever. I don't need that. I trust God that He's going to work stuff out, and He's got that covered. He might use a homeless person to help me. He might use a homeless person to help me a lot more than a rich person ever could, but that's really not what it's about, right? I just trust God. And so that hate and selfishness, those bad reasons for treating different people different, they're gone from my life when I'm living by faith, when I really trust God. And sometimes that's a process, to be fair, because our faith is working on growing. And so we have to grow toward where we treat people the way they ought to be treated. So favor the rich, just say no. Favor the rich, no, for many good and great reasons. Namely, we can just trust God to take care of things. Living faith shows faith-filled works. Point number 2, 14 through 26, pretty famous verses here to say the least. What good is it, my brothers, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that God is one, you do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. Do you want to be Do you want to be shown, you foolish person, that faith apart from works is useless? Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered up his son Isaac on the altar? You see that faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by his works. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness, and he was called a friend of God. You see that a person is justified by works and not by faith alone. And in the same way, was not also Rahab the prostitute justified by works when she received the messengers and sent them out by another way? For as the body apart from the spirit is dead, so also faith apart from works is dead. So we have two Old Testament people here, Abraham and Rahab. And the fact is, they're very different, right? We could list the difference between Abraham and Rahab, and we could go a long way, a long time. But they had a really important similarity. They both had faith and works, and the two went hand in hand. William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army, has a lot of great quotes about this type of thing. Our works actively demonstrate our faith. Faith alone is not enough. When all is said and done, there's a lot more said than done. Faith and work should travel side by side, step answering to step, like the legs of men walking. First faith and then works, and then faith again, and then again works, and then works again, until they can scarcely distinguish which is the one and which is the other. Now, I do think the Salvation Army, my understanding, is definitely kind of teach salvation by works of merit. A really bad, mistaken doctrine that's not biblical, just to be clear. But on this last quote in particular, I think he's exactly right, that faith and works are just really right together, right? That's really what James is teaching. It's what the Bible teaches in general, right? I said in the 9 o'clock time when we were doing James 1, Martin Luther is the guy kind of famous for wanting to throw James out of the Bible. He couldn't get his head around what it said about how works are important. And I don't think Martin Luther was a poor Bible student, just to go on record. But he sure seems like a poor Bible student on that particular thing. Because, it's throughout the Bible that faith and works go hand in hand. I'll use a particular example I like a lot. I don't think it's actually that I like it because it makes it look like I really know the Bible well or something like that and can pull out obscure examples or something. But I really like it because it just stands out to me when you're reading Nehemiah. And Nehemiah is going to get the wall rebuilt, right? He's got all these people working. He says something along the lines of, God is going to fight for us and God's going to give us the victory. That's not an exact quote, but that's, he says something really right along those lines. It's on God. God's got us covered. God's got this victory. We ain't got a thing to worry about. All these enemies. And then what does Nehemiah do? He just sits back, doesn't arm any. Now, this part's false, just to be clear, because we're going out on the internet, whatever. Does Nehemiah, maybe I should do that. Does Nehemiah just sit back and say, well, God's got it covered. Let's not arm ourselves. Whatever we do, we shouldn't arm ourselves. Whatever we do, don't place guards. That's not what Nehemiah does at all. He placed guards. He has people armed. Well, I guess Nehemiah just was a poor servant of God, right? I mean, the Bible must condemn Nehemiah over and over again, or at least once or twice, because he apparently had no clue what real faith looks like. I mean, here he is saying God's going to give the victory, and he's busy arming people. What? I mean, he is such a confused servant of God. That's just not what the Bible says about Nehemiah. Nehemiah is a great servant of God. Nehemiah is somebody who had an incredible trust in God. Nehemiah heard about the people in trouble. And what did he do? He prayed. That's a pretty faith-filled response, if you ask me. And he didn't just pray once. He prayed a longer prayer. Then he prayed a really short prayer once the king noticed that he had a troubled face. He said that really short prayer. And so Nehemiah is trusting God. But Nehemiah doesn't think works and faith are separate. He doesn't think that trusting God for the victory means you don't do anything yourself to prepare to fight. You know, God may give you the victory by having you fight. In fact, that's a pretty common way for God to give victories. And so Nehemiah understands things like that. And it's like, why would you be a Bible student that reads through Nehemiah, comes across this stuff in just the space of 2 or 3 chapters? Nehemiah's a lot longer than that, but all that I'm talking about is just 2 or 3 chapters there, where it's clear Nehemiah has faith in God for the victory, but Nehemiah realizes there's something for Nehemiah's faith to do: arm the people, set guards, etc. There's no conflict there. And that's not, I'm just picking Nehemiah. That's throughout the Bible. And so it's a little bit odd for somebody to come to James and think that James is teaching something that's just not been taught before. It's not just odd, it's just wrong. It's just flat out wrong. James is teaching what the rest of the Bible teaches. Maybe he's making it a little bit plainer, but he is making it clear. James declares that faith alone, verse 24, faith without works, obedient action is profitless, 14 and 15, unable to save, 14, dead, 17 and 26, invisible, verse 18, demonic, verse 19, barren/useless, verse 20, imperfect, verse 22, not like Abraham's, 21 through 23, and obviously incapable of justifying, if it's all those things, right? There's 3 types of faith, and most of them don't save. Dynamic faith involves the whole person. There's a dead faith, verses 14 through 17. Dead faith touches only the intellect. There are people that know God exists, but it's not doing them any good spiritually because it's just intellectual, right? We look at the children of Israel in the wilderness wanderings, and I love there at the end of Exodus, where it just, it summarizes something really important. They had a pillar of fire that went before them at night or stayed in one place at night. They could see that pillar of fire. And then they had a pillar of cloud, I guess, during the day that went before them or stayed, if they were supposed to stay somewhere. Now, exactly how many children of Israel in the wilderness could make some kind of argument that, I just don't know if there's a God. I'm just not sure. I just don't know. Well, we got a pillar of cloud, during the day, and we got a pillar of fire at night. And who in the world knows how that happens if there's not a God? And it's all some kind of direct revelation of God. But I just don't know if I believe there's a God. Now, listen, they had faith at that level of knowing there's a God. How could they not? They had to know there's a God. How much saving faith did they have? How much dynamic faith did they have? We know the story of Exodus. We know the story of wilderness wanderings. They wandered in the wilderness because they lacked dynamic faith, but they did not lack dead faith. They had a belief. They intellectually knew God existed. They really had no choice about that. I do think one of the lessons in Exodus, and I'm getting close on time, I understand that. One of the big lessons in Exodus is people being forced to believe isn't helpful to having dynamic faith. I think that lesson's there to learn. Sometimes we wonder why. I think the evidence is pretty overwhelming. Y'all probably do too, for God existing. But the truth is, you do have to think about things these days. You don't have a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire. God is not forcing people to believe in him today. He's letting people have to do some thinking. He's provided plenty of evidence. But some people choose, they don't want to believe, so therefore they don't believe. Anybody who comes to a saving faith today, comes to a dynamic faith today, has to work through, mentally, what's going on. And that's a feature, not a bug. Because we see how it worked in Exodus when they were basically forced to have a level of faith, to believe God existed, but that didn't really produce a dynamic faith very often, it seems like, because they had trouble all the time. But dead faith only touches the intellect. Demonic faith involves both the mind and the emotions. The devils tremble. That's an emotional response. They do better than a lot of people that claim to just believe in God. They actually believe in God and are emotionally impacted. But a dynamic faith involves the intellect, the emotions, and the will. True-hearted, wholehearted. What a great song. The mind understands the truth, the heart desires and rejoices in the truth, and the will acts upon the truth. So faith alone, a dead faith or demonic faith, obviously does not secure salvation. We have to have the will that acts. We have to have the works, right? We have to have the works, not to try to earn anything from God, because that's crazy. You can't earn anything from the one true and living God. Obviously, he has no needs. How could you earn something from somebody that has no needs? But instead, just to do what he says. I do not know it if you know it, but we face a crisis or two in this country and in this world, or maybe a crisis or 10 in this world. And I propose that we depend on the following people to solve them. There's two of them. And there's two more. Maybe you recognize some of these people, at least one of them. Have you figured out what the problem would be in depending on these four people to solve our problems? I bet you do know. Euler, I think that's how you'd pronounce maybe the greatest mathematician that's ever lived. 1707 to 1783, it's going to be kind of hard for him to help much now. Marie Curie, however you say her name, I think won more than one Nobel Prize. It's very impressive. But 1867 to 1934, she's not going to be too helpful either. Then Gauss, maybe the second greatest mathematician that's ever lived, 1777 to 1855, he's not much help either these days. And then, of course, Albert Einstein, maybe the one that gives things away, 1879 to 1955, he's just not very helpful these days either. It is hard to get much done with dead things. I tell you right now, if all four of them could be alive at the same time, and I had the hardest problems on earth to solve, I think those four would be an awfully good team. But they're not a good team now because they're dead. When we have a dead faith, what good is it? It's kind of obvious it can't do any good. Dead things can't do good by definition. You could be the strongest man in the world right now. And I'll tell you right now, an hour after you're dead, you're not going to be much help on picking up anything or doing anything. You could be the smartest person in the world, smartest woman that's ever lived, ready to win 10 Nobel Prizes if you could win 10 of them. And you might can do a lot of good while you're alive, but once you're dead, you're not solving any more problems. And so a dead faith obviously cannot do any good. And so we need to have a living faith. A living faith shows faith-filled works. Faith minus works is non-profitable, non-useful, non-saving, and faith minus works is dead. It's no wonder it cannot profit or be of use or save. And so living faith acts and keeps acting. And that's the story of James 2. Favor the rich. Living faith shows no favoritism. Favor the rich that just say no. Favor the rich, no, for many good and great reasons. Living faith shows faith-filled works. We've got to have the two together. And the two are together, right, in the Bible. Not just James, but in the Bible, the two are together. And so how do I get back to that other screen? Alt-tab.